Welcome to a Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn, and today I have with me Scott. Scott, welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Honored to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure, and thanks to Daryl for introducing us.
Yeah. I've been in Daryl's circle for a long time, so when he said, you need to meet this guy, I'm like, well, then I got to meet this guy, because he's never steered me wrong yet.
So native San Antonian, married, one son who works up in Dallas. You guys live out by the lake, which is what we all would like to do. But
but I live near Medina Lake, so okay. it's an irrigation lake, true. So it's not full all the time.
It's actually pretty dry the last year or so.
Actually, right now you can walk across it. Yeah,
that's sad. That's sad to hear. But so you've been you're John Maxwell certified coach. You've been coaching leaders for years now. But as we were talking before the show, and we'll get into this in the next episode where we talk about your book, I'm sure, a bit more, but we were talking about time management, and you're like, I hate that phrase. Let's go there first.
Okay. Well, the truth is we say that, right? Time management. We're going to manage our time. The truth is time just is. I mean, it happens, right? Hold on. There, time just happened, right then. Mm-hmm. It's not really time that we have to manage. It's our energy, it's our self, it's our productivity, it's our focus. It's all things about us. And I think that's actually one of the reasons that people like the term time management, because it kind of takes the responsibility off of, I still have to do something. I have to manage something, but it's time. It's out there. Mm-hmm. And if something goes wrong, it's out there. When the reality is, if you're not managing your time well, it's really usually more about how you're setting up your focus, your energy, your schedule. What are you doing to manage yourself?
Mm. And we like to believe we're in control.
It's a sense of you're in control. It's also a sense of, well, then it's not my fault. Mm. In a way, it almost kind of absolves you from having to fix it, mm-hmm. because it's out there. Something happened out there. And obviously we all have challenges, so some folks either because of their brain chemistry, how they're wired, whatever, that kind of thing. But then just there's the normal day of, if you're working a day job, if you've got something going on, 99.9% of us get interrupted at least 10 to 20 times a day. You had the plan, you set it out. Oh, this is what I'm going to do today. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that never happens, right? Something interrupts you, something changes, something goes wrong, something takes longer than you planned, something takes less time than you planned. Doesn't matter what it is. And then it's how do you react and refocus and recenter and deal with all of those things that are going to happen. But because those things sometimes feel like they're coming in from outside, it's like, well, there was nothing I could do about it. My boss interrupted me, and, so I didn't get everything done today that I was supposed to get done. Well, wait a minute. There are still things you have control over that you can do in response to that, mm-hmm. or in preparation for that, or to acknowledge that, or to deal with that. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times we kind of ignore the parts that are in our control.
What would you say a root cause of people not being able to flex with, so they've got the plan and then they've got reality, and when things go awry, what would you say a root cause or the root cause is to why they're not able to flex with life?
It's a couple of different things that happen to us. One is what I call the urgency fallacy. There's a famous thing called the Eisenhower matrix. Most people know it. They may not know it by that name, but they know it. It's that idea of urgent and important. If you put those on a grid, there's very urgent, very important. There's not urgent, important. There's not urgent, not important. And then there's, what would the other one be? Urgent, but not important, right? So ringing telephone is urgent.
Or feels that way.
Not that important. To your interruption, mm-hmm. it's there, it's ringing, it's got my attention. So there's an urgency to it, or a feeling of urgency to it. But the reality is, odds are really good they're going to leave a voicemail and you can call them back. So it's not really that important to answer in that moment, unless, like if you're an emergency room physician on call, okay, answer the phone. But short of that, short of that kind of thing, move on. So it's this kind of false sense of the things that come at me must take my attention. as opposed to, wait a minute, evaluating, is this actually something that I should give my attention to, and then acting in accordance with what you've decided. So there's that kind of false urgency that happens to us. I think another one that happens is, quite frankly, we are really bad at estimating time in general. If you ask somebody, how long is a task going to take you to do? If you've never done the task before and you say, oh, it's going to take me an hour, multiply that by 5. That's how long it's going to take you roughly. And believe it or not, there's actually studies that show that somewhere between 3 and 5 times what you estimate is pretty close to usually what it takes you. That's one that you've never done before. But even a task that you do every single day and repetitive, and you feel like, oh yeah, I know exactly how long this takes me, there's a lot of times some flex one way or the other, because again, what happens outside of your control affects that. How many of us have, we're about to jump on a meeting and all of a sudden the software wants to update or your computer doesn't update. It's like, and now 10 minutes go by before you can actually jump on the meeting. So there's all these things that truly are outside of your control, but they affect that sense of time that you have. And we don't acknowledge that. We pretend like that sort of, the estimate I have, that's exactly how long it's going to take. And we plan for that, but then we don't allow any give or any flux. So like I tell people on my calendar every single day, I have about 90 minutes, because I've discovered this is about how long I need, and I've played with it and experimented, of what I call UPW. UPW stands for unplanned work. It's just the stuff that comes up during the day that, I need to deal with it today, but I didn't plan on dealing with it today. It's that email that comes in from a client that it's like, oh, I didn't know I was going to get an email from a client. I didn't have that on my calendar, but I need to respond to this client. Or it's that software update that runs that it's like, I didn't want this to run. Okay, I got to go ahead and deal with it. So it is those interruption type things, but it's acknowledging the fact that you're going to be interrupted and planning for that, because we don't often plan. We think because it's unexpected, I can't plan for it. But there's a difference between an unexpected event and something you can't plan for. You can plan for the fact that there will be an unexpected event. I just don't know what it's going to be, if that makes sense.
Several years ago, I was in a one-on-one with one of my clients, and we were talking about this issue of his calendar being full. And he was aware and starting to embrace the fact that he needed UPW, like what you're talking about. Time. And so he had put like a block of time in the week.
Okay.
Which is a start.
Well, that's a start. That's a move in the right direction.
And so as we kind of brainstormed in that, I actually ended up with something I started using as well, which is these little 15 to 30 minute buffers throughout the day, just before a big meeting or just after a big meeting, or if I have to travel somewhere in front or the other, or if I were coming to see you, it'd be in the front and back.
Right.
Because you live an hour away, so.
Which is, by the way, exactly what I did on my calendar to come here today is, okay, this is how long it's going to take me to drive. Well, let me add a little time to that because I don't know what traffic's going to do. I don't know other stuff. Maybe I'm going to have to stop and get gas or whatever, and buffer that, and then the same thing for the return home. Exactly.
So I've been doing that for several years now, and I've found that has allowed me to be able to flex. Obviously, you've got UPW, I assume daily, and that's I've noticed I've calmed down a lot. I don't have that internal just kind of.
Well, you feel like you're rushing all the time.
Yeah, the mouse on the treadmill kind of thing, and hamster cage, and so it's just kind of toned down, and it's just that little thing, and yet But I've had peers and friends look at my calendar, and go, "Your calendar's packed. How are you not stressed?" Because there's little buffers all through there
throughout it, right? Right. And mine, when I say plan UPW, it's a combination of some block time and some buffer time, what you're talking about right now. So, like exactly the same thing. If a client books a call on my calendar for an hour, automatically my calendar blocks off the 15 minutes before that call and the 15 minutes after that call. I don't have to do anything. It's all automated. I've set it up to do that. I immediately have a buffer on both sides. And then I also have it where when you're booking a call on my calendar, you can't book a call within 15 minutes of another thing on my calendar. So if you think about that, that means I always have 30 minutes between two calls. So even if I run over a few minutes or whatever, have to take care of biological needs, writing notes from the call, whatever it is, there's stuff that I need to do a lot of times after a call. And I have to open things up and get ready for the next call. It gives me plenty of time to do that and take care of all of that without feeling like, oh, I'm just running from meeting to meeting and all I'm doing today is, in meetings by just putting those buffers. And then I also have a little bit of time. It's not the full 90 minutes that I block off for the things that kind of built up during the day that maybe, again, that's those client emails that you need to answer so that I can close out the day clean. So I can leave the day, and when I turn off the lights and step out of my office, I'm done. I'm not over in the house trying to spend time with my wife, trying to have dinner with my wife, thinking about, oh, I still got that email that I've got to answer, and I've got this other thing, and all of that's going on in my head. Even if I'm not doing it on my phone, I'm still thinking about it. I'm not really present. So it's the combination of those two things helps you start to create that rhythm and that flow so that you can relax and can feel like, oh, I can actually take a breath and not feel like I'm wasting time. That time is not wasted. That time is vital for your ability to focus and pay attention and really be proactive and think. Again, those 15-minute buffers, that's when you can decide, is those 72 emails that I just got really important right now, or can I go on? You can process, you can think, you've got white space or blank space to be able to do that cognitive work. So you're no longer reacting to everything. You're actually being more proactive even during the day.
You said something I want to go to, but before we transition there, tools that you use, we make assumptions that everybody knows about the tool I use. But there may be somebody in the viewing audience that goes, I've never heard of that tool. So for your calendar, what do you use?
So it's a combination of, it's Calendly is how people book for me. Again, there's a million different calendar, Acuity, Calendly, Book Me. There's 40 million of them. And they all more or less work similarly, if not the same. I happen to use Calendly. And that's how you actually see my availability. So it's linked into, in my case, just a Google Calendar where I block off time. And, if I've got family time, I block that. I've got my goddaughter's band concert tonight. Well, that's blocked off on my calendar. So nobody can book during that time. And it just looks for my availability and books it. And then for the what I was talking about where it blocks the buffers, I actually have that hooked into a Zapier, a Zap, where anytime anyone books a Calendly call, it automatically adds the buffer. 15 minutes on either side and buffers that in. Again, there's other ways you could do that, but in that case, I have that. One of the things I like to encourage people on tools is realize the tools don't solve the problem, but that doesn't mean don't use tools. To be clear, the tool isn't fixing it, but once you've identified like, hey, I need a 15-minute buffer. Okay, now go find, because there's more than one way you can solve that problem. To some extent, I don't care how you solve that problem. But once it becomes a regular need, meaning if I had to do that manually, and at first I did, I would go in and manually book time. And I'm like, okay, now this is taking me a significant amount of time. It is a repetitive task. I have to do it every single time. Let me find a way to either delegate that or automate that. And in this case, I automated it and made it happen, automatically. That's where you inject tools, is the tool actually helps take something that you do and automate it or make it more streamlined. Same thing on the Calendly. Why do I have a Calendly hooked in my availability? So that I don't have that email back and forth with somebody. Well, Tuesday at 2, and then you got the time zone. And because I work with people internationally, I work with people in 16 different countries. Trust me, I'm like, okay, that's Japanese time, so that's 13 hours. So, I don't want to do all of that. So I have a tool. So it's those places where you discover that you've got things that you either have to do repetitively over and over again, or those things where having the ability to automate it or simplify it or inject a tool takes care of some of that back and forth and that things that eat up time. Hey, Tuesday at 2, well, is that Central Time or Mountain Time? I don't want to do that. That's a hassle. So that's where you inject the tools. Because a lot of times what we look at the tool is, the tool's going to solve the problem. And it's like, no. The tool will solve the problem. It's not always the problem that you think. The tool solves the automation or the simplification or the taking off those repetitive tasks from your have to do it kind of thing.
So you work with clients across 16 countries. What would you say the common, and I think you've touched on it already, but what would you say the common misbelief is about time management? You already went there with we can actually manage time. But as far as how do people, when you give them this advice, because I'm sure you've given them this advice, kind of what's those 2 or 3 things that get in the way?
So a lot of the pushback is around, I don't actually have as much control over my time as I believe you do. And that comes a lot of times, and I'm going to use the example of a day job because this is the most common one, but honestly, if you're self-employed and work for yourself, this still happens. It just happens a different way. It's that feeling of, my boss tells me when to be here. My boss tells me when to go home. My boss controls what's on my to-do list. I don't control it. Well, the truth is, if you work for an employer, you're self-employed with one client. But you're still self-employed, okay? And that's my framing for that, because everyone always say, W-2 job is, it's more secure, it's more. No, really, you're self-employed with one client, because if that client goes away, your job went away. They close down, they downsize, whatever.
Decide to separate.
Yeah, whatever it is, that goes away. So it's that framing of, wait a minute, if I'm self-employed, then I need to have some autonomy and some input into what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So once you recognize that that's true, then it's like, I can actually go in my boss's office and have a conversation with them about what's on my to-do list and what I need to do. And I did that when I worked in the corporate world. I went into there were times that he'd put something on my plate and I'd say, okay, I need 15 minutes to talk to you about this. Okay, great. Come in. I'd go in his office. I'm like, look, you put this on my plate, but I've also got this, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this, and I've got this, and I've got this. You need to tell me what your priority is, because I cannot do all of these, in the amount of time I have available. So what am I taking off my plate because you're putting this new thing on my plate? Believe it or not, he really respected that. He would look at me and go, awesome. Because here's the thing. He wanted all of those things done, and he wanted them done well. He didn't want me halfway doing something or letting something drop off. He wanted that awareness of, wait a minute, I'm overburdening Scott. I've got too much on his plate. I need to either shift something off or tell him, okay, that can be delayed or whatever it is. He wanted to be involved in that decision-making and process too. So it was actually a good thing. But most of the time we're afraid to go in and have that conversation because it's like, they're going to fire me or they're going to let me go or they're going to whatever. No, you can. You can control both upwards and downwards. You can manage the folks below you and you can manage the folks above you if you step in and stop thinking about it as just, quote, management and start recognizing, no, there's leadership, right? There's the difference. Manage things, lead people is the expression. Okay, I can sit down with my staff and I can say, here's my expectations. Here's what I want. My staff learned that if my door was closed, it meant send me an email. If my door is open, it means you're free to walk in. I'm doing work that I don't care if I get interrupted right now. Versus, no, I need an hour to really concentrate on this task and knock it out and get it done. Okay, I went and closed the door. Now, granted, if it was urgent and emergency and something's on fire, okay, they'll knock on the door and they'll come in. But I train them to understand the difference between this truly is an emergency and I need to interrupt. And no, this could be an email and he'll get back to me in an hour or two and it's just fine.
Speaking of training and emails, so most leaders tend to have too many emails. So how did you train your staff to know when to email you and when not to include you? Because the famous CYA is CC everybody.
CC everybody.
And then you can't get in trouble.
And the truth be told, I was on a corporate job where, as an example, I left to go to a 1-hour meeting. And when I got back to my office, I had 197 unread emails. So it was not unusual for me to get 200-300 emails in an hour, several thousand in a day. That was very normal in that position. And I did do some of what you're talking about, which is sitting down with folks and saying, okay, why did you include me on this versus why didn't you? And let's talk about the expectations of when to include me and when not to include me. Some of that, however, wasn't my direct staff. It would be, they're emailing somewhere and now that person over here added me. So my staff knew not to include me, but somebody else included me because they felt like I needed to be thrown on it. Okay. So there's two pieces. One is, yes, you can educate and train and sit down with folks and go, let's just talk it through. Why did you include me on it? So I never went in and said, oh, you're in trouble. You included me. It's why did you include me on this? Why did you feel it was necessary to see me? And they would provide a reason. And then you can talk through, okay, I see why you thought that, but let's look at it this way, or, let me educate you on why I wasn't needed to be included. Vice versa, you could also say, okay, yeah, I see your point. Include me away. That makes perfect sense. So it's a matter of doing that. But even there, you can't control all of it because some of it is people that are completely outside of your zone of control. You can't go have that conversation with them. So there you have to interject the second level, which is what do you do to manage your email? So, tricks like if you've been CC'd on a bunch of emails, the truth is the way email works, the last email in that chain has all of those emails in it. So rather than having to go and open 400 emails, I just open the last one, scroll to the bottom, very quickly scan from the bottom to the top, figure out what's going on. Most of the time, those are emails where it's informational and it's just they're including me on information. There's no action I need to take. I can now just mark all of those as read and file them. They're there if I need them, but I've informed myself it takes, 8-10 minutes to read that chain. I'm done. So I could very quickly go through 2,000 emails and get it down to maybe 10 or 12 that I actually needed to process or think about or take some action to. The rest of them usually were, truthfully, I didn't need to be included on it, but I was, so I needed to make sure I was aware. So that way, if somebody walked in my office and said, hey, did you read that email from Sam? I could get, yes, I did. Do you want to talk about it? That kind of thing. So it is a combination of both educating the staff, training the staff, and that's important. And then the flip of that is what do you do in terms of maintaining? And I maintained inbox zero in that job. And I'd get 2,000 or 3,000 emails in a day. And yet by the end of the day, every day, my inbox would be empty. So you can do that, and it's not like I spent 14 hours a day reading email.
I heard this phrase a few years ago, and I've yet to do it just because of the way I'm wired, but it comes to the forefront occasionally. Email bankruptcy, where you go in and go, I haven't read these emails in my inbox in the last 3 months or 6 months. Email bankruptcy is delete them all. Some people that sends cold chills up their spine.
Mark them all read and file them.
Yeah, put them in a folder, bankrupt as of, Q1, Q2, whatever. Have you met anybody that does that? Or?
Oh, yeah. I've actually had clients that's what we've ended up doing is, and by the way, to add to that, what I also tell them to do is send an email to all of the really important people after you do that and say, hey, something happened to my inbox and I've lost a bunch of my emails. If there was something really important that you are waiting on from me, please forward that email to me.
Nice.
Okay. But just to the people that are really important.
How often do they send that email?
That's the thing. You'll get like 10 back, that's it. That's all you'll get, and your 30,000 unread emails got down to 15, or whatever it is, because those were actually the ones where somebody was legit waiting for an answer. The vast majority of the emails that we get in a work-related environment, and honestly in a home-related environment too, are things that it's just, quote, informational. So again, there's a lot of tools and techniques you can inject, go through and, if there's a bunch of newsletters you're subscribed to, there's this thing at the bottom that says unsubscribe. Do it. And again, there's tools that you can use that will do that automatically if you want to, but you can just do it manually as they come in. If it's a newsletter that you've just kind of had come into your inbox and there's more than 5 of them that aren't read, unsubscribe. You're not going to read it anyway. Just admit it. You can always subscribe to it later. It exists. It's not going to go away. So that kind of thing to reduce some of the clutter. And then reality is, too, it's that idea of processing. See, one of the things that happens is a lot of us use our inbox as our to-do list. The inbox, I keep marking it unread because I'm going to get back to it. There's something I need to take action. Your inbox is a terrible way of managing your actions. You need to use, whether it's a paper, actual physical list or a tool like Asana or Todoist or something else that you're keeping. Those emails need to move out of the inbox and over to this is the action I need to take so that you can actually plan when in the day, when am I going to take that action and have it like that.
And Google Calendar and I believe Outlook now you can
just
turn the email into a task.
Yes. And you can use that. I use Asana and I turn emails into tasks using Asana. Most of the to-do kinds of apps will let you do that. There's a way of doing it. And you still have the email that way when you need to refer back to it. You can just click on a link and it goes and finds the email in your inbox and pulls it open. So it's that idea of getting it out of the inbox management and into the actual place where you manage your task. So I teach people you kind of need the task management app, you need a calendar, and then you need the ways of kind of basically storing information and accessing it. That could be a combination of your email. That could also be other sources of information depending on the kind of job you do. It could be folders. It could be a Google Drive. It could be a notebook. There's a lot of different ways, but it's some way of managing that information.
As you mentioned, the unwanted newsletters or unread newsletters, it reminded me back in the day, both in corporate life and then in my consulting practice years ago. I'm a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, if that means anything to you or the audience. But so leaning out the process, one of the things was who's actually reading the reports you're generating.
Right.
And so one of my favorite things to do was just have either myself or the people I was coaching stop sending the report and see who notices it's missing.
Right. And see who asked for it.
And so this is a few years ago. There was an email follow-up that would happen after a day-long session that the sense was nobody was reading it. And so I arranged for it to stop being sent out. 2 years later, somebody goes, hey, I didn't get the summary from the meeting last month. And somebody else goes, yeah, I didn't either. And here's the fun part. Somebody goes, well, I got it. Somebody else goes, I got it too. And somebody else goes, I'm not sure if I got it. I don't remember. I'm not sure. And so I'm just sitting there smiling. And these executives are arguing with each other about, no, I got it. I didn't get it. Why are you getting it and I'm not? And no, I can show it to you right now. It'd been 2 years since that had gone out. Yeah. And so finally I couldn't contain myself anymore. And I said, that hasn't been sent out in about 2 years. And they all kind of looked at me and I said, 2 years ago, I announced to you guys that I was famous for doing this. And so that's one of the ones I did it to. And they're like, it hadn't been that long. I just go back and check your inboxes, check your history. And they're like, well, we need it. And I'm like, obviously you don't.
Obviously you don't. Right.
Well, no, you need to start doing it again. No, not going to happen.
Yeah. And there's a ton of that and by the way, for anyone not in the corporate environment who's going, I am so glad I work by myself and I don't have that. Yes, you do. You just do it to yourself. There are things that you are allowing.
153 unread emails in your inbox.
There are things that you are allowing, and it could be email and it's other ways too. Mm-hmm. We do things sometimes because we've always done it. There's a famous story by Zig Ziglar about cutting the end off the ham that, the idea that you can look it up, but it's this idea that sometimes we just do things and we stop knowing the reason why we did them, but they become a habit. And so we just keep doing it over and over again because that's how we've always done it. Mm-hmm. And I don't care whether you're self-employed. I don't care whether you're talking about your job, corporate, or even your personal life. There are things that you're allowing into your life that are unexamined. And because they're unexamined, you don't actually know if they're necessary or not.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that idea of constantly testing that and thinking through, wait, is this still necessary? Is this still something that I need to spend time and energy and effort on? Or is there some other way, or do I just need to say no to it and cut it out, or whatever it is? Because again, a million different answers to that question depending on what the task is. But the idea of periodically examining those things and those assumptions and making sure that it's still true is vital.
Mm-hmm. We last thoughts. We're kind of coming up against the top of the hour here. Final thoughts around this whole idea of time.
Yeah, I think if I had to sum it up for folks, the idea of, I work with a lot of folks on time and money. That tends to be the two areas where folks come to help. They feel like that's what's holding them back. And at the end of the day, what I like to encourage people to realize is, the truth is, it's not a time problem, it's not a money problem, it's a you problem, which at first glance sounds kind of harsh and like, oh, that's bad news. But here's the really cool part. You're also the solution. Mm-hmm. It's not the app on your phone. It's not all of these other tools and techniques that we're talking about. The only reason they're important is how and if you implement them.
Yeah, enabling you.
It's you doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You're the power in this situation. Mm-hmm. So if you're feeling hopeless about it, if you're feeling frustrated about it, if you're feeling like, I've tried everything I can try and none of it works, I'm here to encourage you and let you recognize that no. You actually have more power in this situation than you believe you do. You just have to learn how to take it, how to implement it, how to apply it. Mm-hmm. And it will work. It will get better. Mm-hmm. It's not that it's ever going to be perfect. That's a false belief. But it is going to get better, and you can get to a point where, like you said, you're not feeling like the hamster on the wheel. You actually feel like, no, I've got some sense of control. I've got some calm in my life. It's not just running from fire to fire to fire all day long, every day.
That's good. Scott, I want to talk about your book in the next episode, but do you touch on this time topic in the book?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how could they find that book if they were interested?
So I actually set up a page just for your listeners that has all of the resources as the book. It actually has some free resources. If somebody's struggling in this area of time, they can actually get kind of a 5-part series on here's some of the first steps you need to take.
Great.
So if you'll go to inspiredstewardship.com/journey.
Okay.
Just inspiredstewardship.com/journey. I've got all the resources there. There's a place you could, if you want to have a chat about this, no pressure. I'm not doing it for sales. I'm doing it just if you need some help.
Yeah.
Schedule a time. There's information about the book, my podcast, some other things that I do. It's all right there.
Great, Scott. Well, I'm looking forward to our next conversation, but we'll bring this one to a close.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Thank
buddy.
you.
All right.